Hello everybody and welcome to a new video for Luck Poker. Today we are going to do a reverse hand review, meaning that we're going to play this hand in villain's shoes. And we will try to understand if it is ever possible to fold the second highest full house. I know it looks like a silly question, but you will probably understand in a minute. So here's the end. As you see, I hid my whole cards and I'm sitting on the small blind. He is sitting there with 10-8 off. I really have no hand history with him. We have 128 hands, so I expect him to be the same with me, of course. And let's see the action. So I chose to open from the small blind. He chose to call. It's a bottom range, but I will say it's fine. And the flop hits pretty good for him. I chose to check, and I think as a regular I am checking this board the vast majority of the time. Probably any two cards I'm checking here. And he chose to bet in position, which I think is obviously fine. I go for the call here, which I would say sometimes may look a bit capped, but if we build our ranges properly, I don't think is the case. The turn is another 10, so it's a pretty great card for villain. And he chose to bet again, which of course I like. I don't think you should check back this almost ever. And I chose to call again. The river is the 9 of hearts. I chose to check. Villain chose to bet big. And I chose to just shove. It's a big shove, this one actually. And so, of course, when I do that, I'm representing, I think, straight flush or nothing. The question is, can he ever fold this hand, or it is simply too strong, you know? The only better full house I could have here is 10-9. But, of course, I can have many combinations of 7 of hearts, Queen Jack suited. So having 10-8 is not the nut. It's close to it, but it's definitely not the second nut in this hand. And, I mean, this pot sucks, to be honest. So I remember villain took whole East End Bank, or almost, and at the end chose to call. But yeah, what I wanted to ask here is if we can ever find a fold. You know, this is not the classical spot you study usually, so it's pretty tough to recall how this spot would be played in the solver, because probably it's one of the few you never study. And so yeah, I think it's mainly a logic problem, this one. And it depends a lot also on the field you're playing, in my opinion, and how bad or good your opponent is. If I have to think it through, I think if I was in villain shoes and I'm facing a recreational player, I don't think I'm ever folding, simply because there is a chance he's just overplaying something, like maybe he's just check shoving with the ace of hearts, or maybe pocket sixes, or a weaker full house. So I think if my opponent was a bad player, I don't think I would ever consider folding this hand. I'll probably hate life for a moment, but at the end I think I would press the call, and not super happy, but definitely happy. So I think if he thinks for any reason that I am a recreational player, I don't know, maybe he's a regular of the field and he just saw me and never saw me before, so he think I may be a recreational player. I think that's not cool. I wouldn't even use a 10 bank probably, and that's it. If you think our opponent is an average / bad regular, I think that's when we can consider folding this hand, because, you know, average or bad regulars typically do not go that much out of the line. They play kind of straightforwardly, and I don't think this kind of regular would ever pick something like 8-9 and turn it into bluff here. This is something that can be done, of course, something that I think a good regular may do, but I wouldn't give a bad regular credit to do that. But at the same time, a bad regular is still a regular, and he probably knows that if he has the ace of hearts, he's probably not strong enough to check shove here and make this big raise and get called by worse. So, since I don't expect this kind of regular to be good enough to have bluffs here, but at the same time, I expect him to be good enough to understand what is an overplay here. I think we may technically fold this hand. It sucks, definitely. It's gonna be a tough fold, but I think we are way better doing that than making this hero call. Now, if you are versus a very good player, and this may be the case versus the average NL500 Zoom regular, that's when things get a bit tough, in my opinion. That's because, he's probably, of course, not overplaying anything here, but at the same time, he may have some kind of bluff. And if we fold 10-8, we are folding a lot. Also, something I think we should consider when you're versus a good player is how many times we actually have a better hand than the one we have here. Of course, a better hand here means having 10-9 or one of those straight flushes. And the problem is that we don't have too many, to be honest, because of course we have in our range many hands which contain the 7 of heart. But are we betting with enough of them on flop and turn? I'm not sure. I mean, especially our off-suite hands with a 7 of hearts, I think most of them are typically checked back on the flop. And if you consider the queen-jack suited combos, which now have a straight flush, I think part of them, if not all of them, are usually a 3-bet pre-flop in this dynamic. So, considering that, yes, theoretically speaking, there are better hands than 10-8 here, but we probably do not have all those combos. I think we should probably still call with this hand. It sucks, but it's probably a call. And I would like to check now on GT Wizard how this hand should have been played. Okay, I skipped to the flop because I think the pre-flop is pretty straightforward, and here on the flop, as I said, I should check more often than not at the small blind. Here, the solver makes me, would like me to check 64% of the times. I think as a simplification in game, I would just check range. Anyway, let's see what the solver does after I check. Let's see the 10-8 off, what it does, and as you see, it is mainly a bet. Of course, time to time, it would be great if you can check it. We can use it a randomizer, of course, but yeah, it is definitely mainly a check. It would also like, I mean, it likes all sizes, to be honest, but his favorite size is the bigger one. Anyway, in this pot, Villain bet a bit smaller than that, and so he bet something like 67% of the pot. And to this bet, I chose on the small blind to check call. Then the turn is the 10, and as the small blind, of course, I should check more often than not. There is no particular reason to check call on the flop and donk bet here, as the original raiser. And once I check, Villain chose to bet again with his 10-8, which once again is the favorite line for the solver, as we expected. I chose to call, the river is the 9, I checked again here. There will be some donk betting range, but to be honest, I did not consider it in game. And once I check, Villain chose to bet again. Here is where his line deviated mainly from what the solver does, and he chose to make a 2/3 bet while the solver mainly overbets or checks, which I prefer in general. And with 10-8, he should have, of course, overbet more often than not. But as you see, 10-8 sometimes likes to bet a bit smaller than that, so I think we can still play with it. And he bet large. Let's see precisely how much. Okay, so if with 10-8, when he bets big, he bets like 29, which is 85% of the pot. You could also go all in, as you see. That's pretty sick. And anyway, he bet big, as we said. And I chose here to just shove. And as you see, 10-8, it's kind of close, It's a borderline hand, as you see. 10-8 is mainly called, but folding is not insane. This means that the EV of calling and folding is going to be pretty much the same. And it's a bottom range. So you see, folding this hand is not insane. It's something you should definitely consider. And as we said, I mean, it depends. It depends on villain mainly, I think. Yeah, you should mainly call versus a good player. So I mean, I don't mind his call, of course. And you know, since it is close, theoretically speaking, I think it's really important the way we exploit our opponent. And I think it's really important to make that kind of distinctions we made in the hand review, because sometimes there's tricky things happens in which you can call if your opponent is really bad or really good. But if he's this kind of average passive ABC player, you should probably just fold. You know, sometimes it happens that exploitations works in this weird way. It's important that you are making good assumptions on how your opponent is playing. Because, you know, I think this 10-8, for example, I think it might be a call at NL500 zoom versus a regular. But I think if you're playing like at NL25 versus an average regular, you'd probably just be better off folding, because not enough regulars in the player pool are probably capable of running a bluff like that. But at the same time, if you're playing an L2 and your average opponent is probably really bad, I think that should be an easy call. And of course, just for the sake of curiosity, since I guess you are curious about the hand I had, I will show it in a moment. Obviously, since I'm running hot, I had the straight flush. And that was it. I hope you like this kind of content. Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you like it. Also, let me know how you would have played this hand if you were in the big blind's shoes. Thanks for watching and see you next time.